When we first started Books and Bao, we were living in Seoul, South Korea. And one of our goals initially was to review and promote literature from East Asia. And at that same time, and in that same city, a small indie publisher was also finding its feet. That publisher was Honford Star, and they were the first publisher that we ever worked with. In the years that have gone by, Honford Star have grown and grown and gone from strength to strength, and we still work with them very closely. Every new book that they put out, we are always very, very excited by. But this relationship started a bigger trend of us trying to work with small indie publishers. Honford Star themselves are half based in Korea and half based in the UK. So what I'm going to do here is highlight 10 other independent publishers that you need to be paying attention to. They're all UK based, or at least partially UK based, because they're the ones we work with the most, they're the ones we're most familiar with. You get it, let's go. I want to start by talking about Guts Publishing. What Guts does is very unique. Guts is a tiny, London-based independent publisher that focuses on memoirs and biographies and poetry by people who have an interesting story to tell. Defining that interesting story can be tough, but generally it seems like what they try to focus on is people of marginalised groups, especially what you would describe as working class people. A book they put out a few months ago now at the time of recording was Fishtown by John Gerard Fagan. This was a memoir by I think Glasgow-born Scottish writer who spent several years living in a very, very small town in Japan, and he just kind of documented his experiences in these tiny little notes on his phone that he then catalogued together into this book, and Guts published. Guts have done a lot of really cool work in terms of publishing and just getting people's eyes on the experiences, the poetry, the memoirs, the writing, the experiences, etc. of working class people in the UK, or from the UK. I love what they do, I think it's really cool, and I really like their covers too. Next up is one of my absolute favourite indie publishers. In fact, one of my favourite publishers, full stop. So many of my favourite publishers from all around the world are actually UK indie publishers, and Cipher Press are one of the biggest and best in my heart. Does that make sense? Cipher Press publish queer fiction from within the UK, but not only UK-based writers. They, in 2021, published two of my favourite books of that year. One was my absolute favourite book of the year, and it was by a British writer, and the other was another favourite of mine by an American writer that Cipher published in the UK. Those two books were 100 Boyfriends by Bronte Purnell, who is, I think, California-based, and Tell Me I'm Worthless by Alison Rumfitt, which you probably know is my favourite book of 2021. Cipher Press are doing incredible things for the queer community, and I was lucky enough to actually meet the owners of Cipher Press a few months ago at a bookshop launch in London. Cipher Press are publishing queer books. That is as simple as I can make it. They are promoting and supporting and publishing works by writers who are queer in some or any fashion. Alison Rumfitt, writer of Tell Me I'm Worthless, is a trans woman, and she put out my absolute favourite book of 2021, and she probably wouldn't have been able to do so without Cipher Press. This really highlights how important indie publishers are, and I could write an entire essay on that subject. We need indie publishers like Cipher Press. There are big publishers that would never take a chance on a writer like Alison Rumfitt, but Cipher Press did, and then, lo and behold, my favourite book of the entire year comes out. That's such an important message, that's such an important point. Cipher Press is so important to queer voices in the UK and beyond, and I cannot thank them enough for just existing. Speaking of marginalised groups, let's talk about Influx Press. Influx Press are promoting and supporting and publishing works by writers who are marginalised in some fashion. We could be talking here about race, gender, sexuality, class. Whatever the case, you'll mostly find published by Influx Press writers who are not cis-het white men. Influx Press are doing a great job of making your reading more diverse in some way. Over the last year or two, they've been bringing to the UK the works of Percival Everett. Percival Everett is a huge writer in the US. He is a very, very powerful voice within the Black American community, and in the UK, we just don't really have access to his books. And so Influx Press have been doing that. They've been bringing us, one by one, more and more of his books, and they're continuing to do so into 2022. I absolutely adore the work that Influx Press are doing. I get so excited every time a new book comes along from them. They are doing fantastic work in lifting up the voices of people who are marginalized in any sense, and we really, again, need people like Influx Press. Publishers like Influx and Cipher, I cannot thank them enough for the work that they do. Please, go look at what they're putting out and pick something up from Influx Press. If you've been hanging around Books and Bow, either the blog or the channel for any length of time, then you'll know about Charco Press, because I promote them and I talk about them and I review their books all of the time, and for very good reason. I've worked really closely with Charco Press. They are wonderful people, and they've been kind enough to allow me to interview some of their translators and authors. I love Charco Press so much. If you don't know who they are, Charco Press bring to the UK works from Latin American authors. They work with a range of different Spanish and Portuguese to English translators to bring some of the best South American, Latin American works of fiction to the UK, and they have a knack for finding the best authors from places like Mexico, Argentina, and Chile. I can't thank Charco enough for what they do. Mostly because I found out via Charco Press that many of my favorite authors and novels come from Argentina specifically. Thanks to Charco Press alone, I have come to realize how much I love the literature of Argentina. It is a country very near and dear to my heart because so many of the authors happen to speak to me, and I would never have learned that or known that without Charco Press. And their book covers are phenomenal. And then there's Dead Ink Books. Dead Ink Books are kind of similar to Influx Press in the sense that what they do is pick up authors who might otherwise be ignored, maybe because they come from some marginalised group, or maybe simply because their work is too weird and experimental and strange for commercial publishing and big publishing houses. If you're a writer, probably from the UK, who has had their work ignored, maybe you've written something that's a little weird and you've sent it out there and publishing houses and agents have just ignored you, consider sending it to Dead Ink Books. You never know. They are great at promoting and publishing new works from new writers. They do a lot of debut novels, and they really have a knack for finding the weird stuff, the experimental stuff, the challenging stuff that otherwise gets ignored. And quite often weird and challenging does mean that it comes from a voice that is often marginalised. Not always, but sometimes. And that's how they kind of overlap with Influx. Influx, Cipher, and Dead Ink, these three publishers all together are bringing us some of the best British voices. And then there's voices that are not British. And that's where Comma Press come in. Comma Press publish two big series. One of them is called Refugee Tales. I think they've now done 4 books in the Refugee Tales series. Refugee Tales is a series of short story collections of stories that are written by refugees that have ended up in the UK and have stories to tell. Sometimes those stories, based on the ones I've read, are kind of autofiction. Other times they are purely fictional and maybe they fall into horror, fantasy, or sci-fi. But these are all stories from refugees and they all have interesting tales and perspectives to tell. And then there's that other series which is called Reading the City, or A City in Short Fiction. These books also have gorgeous covers, and they take a city from somewhere in the world and they take about 10 writers from that city, and they get those 10 writers to write short stories that feature in that collection. So for example, you have the Book of Peirene, and the Book of Peirene features 10 authors from Tehran who've each written a short story to be included in that collection. You've got the Book of Tokyo, the Book of Cairo, the Book of Reykjavik. It goes on and on. I've written quite a few reviews of these books. I really enjoyed the Book of Cairo. The Book of Shanghai, that was wonderful. They're covering so many cities around the world. The covers are beautiful. The stories that are included are great. And it's the easiest and quickest way to find writers from a specific city or country. If you're thinking, I want to read more Chinese writers, then you will find 10 Shanghai-based writers in the Book of Shanghai. Same for Tokyo, Reykjavik, etc. Comma Press are fantastic, and they deserve a lot of love and support. Go to their website, check out their books, find a country or a city that you're interested in, and pick up one of their short story collections. I don't even know where to start talking about Tilted Axis. Tilted Axis are very important to me. They have done so much for us, and we have tried to support them as much as possible as well. Tilted Axis are pretty much the reason that we exist as a blog, as a channel, as anything at all. Tilted Axis was started by Deborah Smith. If you know Deborah Smith's name at all, then you probably know her as the translator of Hong Kong. She and Hong Kong together won the Booker International Prize for The Vegetarian. But Deborah Smith in recent years has most prominently been known as the founder of Tilted Axis Press. A lot of my friends work for Tilted Axis or have worked for Tilted Axis. A lot of bloggers and reviewers and critics adore the work that Tilted Axis Press are doing, and for good reason. So many of my favorite books of all time have been published by Tilted Axis. They have published books from Japan, India, Korea, China, Indonesia, Turkey, the list goes on. If you want to check out more literature in translation, turn to Tilted Axis. Go on their website, check out their books, and pick something. I've been through this before, but I have no idea how to pronounce the name of this publishing house. I've gone from Peirene to Peirene to Peirene to Peirene. I don't know. Anyway, this publisher, they are fantastic as well. A lot of the publishing houses that I promote and talk about focus on a specific aspect of translation. Charco Press focus on Latin American fiction. Tilted Axis mostly focus on East Asia or outside of Europe. And then Peirene Press focus on Europe. Everything that they publish is a under 200-page book written by a mainland European writer whose works have been translated into English. So through them you'll find books from Norway, Italy, France, etc. Their books are always short, which is just a lovely part of their philosophy, that they always publish very short books, which I appreciate. And they do a great job of finding really, really unique writers. If you've never read a book from Latvia, they've got books from Latvia. If you've never read a book from Georgia, the country, not the state, they've got books from Georgia. It's amazing what you can discover that you might never have read before just by checking out the works found and published by Peirene Press. Similar to Dead Ink Books is Galley Beggar Press. Galley Beggar is a UK publishing house that focus primarily on UK writers, and they put out weird and experimental things. They, again, put out things that might otherwise get ignored by big publishers. They have a short story prize. They are becoming a very, very big deal. They've won a bunch of awards. They are brilliant. They published Duck's Newburyport by Lucy Ellman, who is a US-born, Scotland-based writer. That was a very, very love it or hate it book, but it probably wouldn't have been published unless Galley Beggar had picked it up. They also published one of my favorite fantasy novels ever, which is Mordu by Alex Feby. Again, a book that might have been ignored by other fantasy publishers. It's a weird, Lovecraftian, goopy, strange, almost horror fantasy book, and I adore it. Publishers like Galley Beggar allow writers to flourish, and I'm so glad that they exist. I've kind of left the biggest to last because I don't even know where to start talking about Fitzcarraldo editions. Where do you begin talking about Fitzcarraldo? They do so much and they do it all so well that it becomes kind of uncanny. Everything that Fitzcarraldo has ever published has been a novel worthy of awards. How do you do that? How do you keep doing that? Fitzcarraldo are eerily good at publishing the best literature ever. If you have no idea who they are, Fitzcarraldo published two types of books, fiction and non-fiction. The fiction is published in these lovely blue covers, and the non-fiction in white covers. Fitzcarraldo are one of those rare indie publishers where you can just go on their website and just click at random on a book, have it sent to you, and you'll love it. The authors that they've put out have won so many massive awards. They have published all of the non-fiction works of French writer Annie Ernaux. They've published into English translation the fiction works of Olga Tokarczuk, one of my favorite authors ever, winner of the Nobel Prize. I'm stumbling over my words because it's just too incredible. Annie Ernaux, Olga Tokarczuk, two award-winning, beloved, world-renowned authors, both published by Fitzcarraldo, and that's just the start. There's so much else out there, some of it in English, most of it in translation. They somehow find the best writers from all around the world, work with some of the best translators from around the world, and bring us into English some of the greatest literary works of our time. I cannot overstate the power of Fitzcarraldo editions. But you probably already know that. Everyone knows Fitzcarraldo. They're massive and good. They deserve to be. They are uncannily amazing at what they do. There you go, there was 10 amazing indie publishing houses that are all based or partially based in the UK, and also Honford Star as well. Throw them in as an 11th. I know there are more. In fact, I have an article on our website that's actually longer than this video, and you can go check out some extra publishers there, but I had to keep it to 10 for brevity. I don't know how long this video is going to be. Please go and visit all of these wonderful indie publishers. I'll put links to their websites in the description. Go check them out, support them, give them your love, give them your money if you're able to. Indie publishers are the backbone of the publishing industry, and there are so many great writers that just wouldn't exist without them. Subscribe for books.